So Christian Horner thinks they don't have a good driver lineup, but does it matter? Really? The team is looking to try and sew up their domination by getting second place in the drivers' standings. But right now things are looking a little bit, close for comfort. Okay, I bet you're all thinking that I'm about to tear Sergio Perez another one. He should be kicked out of the seat and let Daniel Ricciardo come back in. No, I'm not having that. I want Sergio Perez to see out the remainder of his contract, which is until Abu Dhabi 2024. After that, I would like him to either end his Formula One career on his terms or choose another team that he would like to race at. That should be his decision instead of him being booted out by somebody else. Driving with Max Verstappen is going to take out most of your soul and most of your drive to try and achieve glory because, well, you can't, because it's Max Verstappen. I'd like him to see out the remainder of his contract instead of him being either pushed out by the Australian money print or another poor rookie ready to be put on the block if he so much as coughs funny in front of Helmut Marko. The main contention of all of this is that Christian Horner is really starting to get a little bit impatient when it comes to Sergio Perez. Christian Horner reckons that after the shocker of Sergio Perez's weekend in Qatar, the Mexican driver desperately needs to rediscover his old form and that he's not meeting the targets expected of him. As I have said many times on this channel, which you probably should subscribe to if you've been watching many of my videos, this is the next part of the Christian Horner disappointment train. First of all, when a driver starts to falter, Christian Horner backs them up no matter what. He has total faith in them that they can overcome any challenges that they may be having. Then things start to get a little bit shaky and he starts to put the onus on the driver rather than the team. But don't worry, he still has faith that they can actually overcome this, but it's not looking quite as solid as before. And then he starts to get very serious and actually acts like it's a bit of concern and that, this isn't quite working, we need to actually figure this out now. He gets very stern. And then you get Alex Albon's situation in 2020. And that's only but one example. It doesn't help that Helmut Marko has now broken his silence because of course he has, he can't help himself, and said that they have 3 relatively good drivers in AlphaTauri. That says a lot without saying much at all. We all know who's going to actually replace him, but I don't really need to say it myself. And that is really not fair, especially when you consider quite a lot happened at the Qatar Grand Prix was really out of Checo's control. And then that led to them repairing the car, they got the 10-second penalty, the pit lane start, the power unit change while it was there, which was out of Perez's hands, and then he had to go from there. Realistically, the only thing that really I can think was a problem to Red Bull were the track limit violations, which, okay, was fair, but many other drivers had that same problem too. And then maybe they looked at George Russell and how he recovered from near the back to 4th place and Checo could only muster 10th. Okay, maybe it might be a little bit iffy, but still, not all of what Perez did in Qatar was his fault. But needless to say, all the stuff that's happening with Perez right now has gotten Christian Horner longing for something he can see further down the pit lane. Oh, Ferrari, McLaren, Mercedes. Oh, if only we had what they had. He's actually made it very clear that he actually quite likes the idea of a strong driver lineup that the other teams have. Ahem. The most important thing for us is winning both championships. The next best thing after that would be to have both your drivers first and second. You can see Mercedes have a pair, McLaren have a pair, Ferrari have a pair, that are quite tight between the respective drivers. We can't afford to have a big split because if, as you would expect, the grid continues to concertina next year, we need both drivers delivering at the top of their game. And that gets me thinking, why is Christian Horner so concerned all of a sudden? Let's be real here. We all know that Christian Horner absolutely loves to gain the Constructors title, as well as the Drivers title. And to be fair, all the teams really want to win the Constructors. Yes, it's not as sexy as the Drivers title, and history books won't look at the team title with as much fervour and passion as the individual one. But for those of you working for a Formula One team in any capacity, I bet that actually it's something that everybody who works for a team really strives for. I mean, after all, F1 is a team sport, and whoever wins the team title, everyone feels like they've played their part in getting that team there, even the people in the catering department. And I bet Red Bull paid them handsomely. 2024 looks to be like a relatively sedate development season. No real changes that will change the style of the overall car, and I feel like the ATR penalty that Red Bull received is actually starting to bite slightly. In the second half of this year, McLaren have actually scored more points than Red Bull have. So maybe in light of that, McLaren's sudden resurgence, Christian Horner started to get a little bit nervous that maybe the era of Red Bull domination, at least in terms of the team's domination, might be coming to an end. Say, by example, a resurgent McLaren, a refocused Mercedes, or a revitalized Ferrari. Clearly on Red Bull's radar as teams to be paying close attention to. If one of those teams gets the 2024 car absolutely bang on from the start, it might actually make things a little bit uneasy for the team in terms of regaining the Constructors title for a third year in a row. And again, of course, they are going to prioritize Max Verstappen to try and win the Drivers' title again, but the rest of the team want the Constructors title. It's the perfect package to get both. Horner seems somewhat envious of the other teams' lineups and lusting after them. He feels like he had it at the beginning of the season, but no longer. But should he actually be that jealous though? Because I don't think that kind of thing would actually work at Red Bull. I remember us talking about it briefly on the Last Lap podcast, and I kind of wanted to expand upon it. In my opinion, the Red Bull lineup works fine the way it is. After all, Verstappen could win the Constructors title and be comfortably ahead. Perez is there just to help widen the gap to ensure that nobody could challenge Red Bull for team glory. When you look at the other driver lineup, sure, they look very spicy and they look very strong on paper, but when you bring things into reality, there are some pitfalls by having two strong drivers in there, and I think you've seen quite clearly what happens. Mercedes, you saw what happened in Qatar and what's been happening over the rest of the season. Despite them quickly apologizing and aiming to brush it under the carpet, the truth is that it happened, and it could happen again, especially if the 2024 car is better. And it will be better. Then you got two drivers, Russell and Hamilton, who are out for themselves as much as the team, keen to make a point. And sometimes it ends up in them losing points one way or another. Until they can get on the same page, Mercedes can't really mount a challenge for the Constructors because you might get those two drivers bickering amongst themselves. You will need the likes of Toto Wolff to immediately stamp down on them and make sure that they don't do that, something that McLaren is doing. Maybe they're envious of McLaren's lineup, and on paper, again, yes, it's absolutely remarkable. And a bit of a twist. Nobody expected Oscar Piastri to be that good from the start in his rookie year, maybe in a couple of years' time, but not now. And then, of course, you got the absolute mercurial talent of Lando Norris as well. He's been there for many seasons and has seen McLaren actually on the ascendancy. And now he's scored the most podiums in a single season for McLaren he's ever had. The team is also really experienced when it comes to driver conflicts and really know the best ways in actually stopping it in its tracks. They make it very clear that the team comes first. They will come back to the drivers, and whatever the team decide to do ultimately is what the drivers will have to comply with, or they will face consequences. Hamilton and Alonso, Prost and Senna. Need I say more? They don't want that happening again. But will that last if the MCL37, the car for next year, actually is really fast from the beginning, instead of the recent McLaren phenomena of having a not so great car at the beginning and then they suddenly catch up, but it's too late for them to actually get a really good Constructors position? It's a little bit uncertain, but it seems a little better than Mercedes. Now, Ferrari's lineup to Red Bull I think is the most intimidating. Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc clearly get along. There's been no real big conflict or blow up when it comes to the actual drivers. They've not really gone for each other's throats. It's more to do with the fact they've had frustrations with the team itself. On their own, they can actually do really well. And yes, of course, this year, they did come very close to taking each other out of Monza, and there have been some rumblings there, a little bit of bubbling up, but at the moment, they've been focusing on their own set of skills. Charles Leclerc trying to refocus and actually regain what he had at the beginning of his Ferrari tenure. With the calming presence of Frederic Vasseur, they will make sure that any intra-team rivalries that do crop up next year, if their Project 676 thing actually works out the way they intended it to, will actually nip in the bud any sort of team conflict. So maybe Christian Horner might be looking to Sainz and Leclerc and thinking, ooh, okay, that could be really, really potent if that plays out and the car is really, really strong from the get-go and completely bulletproof. In the actual driver standings, Leclerc and Sainz are right next to each other. That is really, really useful. Horner wants to have a team lineup that has two strong drivers who can egg each other on and inspire each other to do better. But Horner, I don't think you've read the memo or read the room. That would not work at Red Bull. It's clear that it would never work so long as Max Verstappen is there. Do you really need me to tell you why? What have we seen in the last 4 years since Pierre Gasly showed up at Milton Keynes? Heck, even Daniel Ricciardo in 2018. Do you want to know why Daniel Ricciardo left? Aside from money from Renault? and him having problems with the Renault engine, and he went to the works team, and I still find that really odd, he was starting to see the writing on the wall with Max Verstappen. At that point in 2018, especially at the beginning, they were pretty much equal to each other. And then suddenly, Verstappen clicked, eschewing his Crashstappen reputation, and then becoming the driver that we know today. Much more mature and absolutely bombastically good. Ricciardo didn't want that. He didn't want to be the number 2, and so he left. And now he's come scurrying back. Maybe Horner thinks that Ricciardo might be just as good as he was in 2018 if he finds his feet again, and Ricciardo might be more willing to be the wingman that he didn't want to be back in 2018. That's his ideal situation. If you had a close driver with Verstappen, he would rail against them. There'd be moments when maybe the second driver is better than Verstappen, and Verstappen is told to hold position or let the other driver pass. Verstappen's not going to do that. There have been plenty of incidents this season when GP and the Red Bull garage have actually given Max instructions, and he just conveniently ignores them. There are moments when Verstappen takes charge, and if there's a second driver who's looking to be relatively close to Max, he's not going to like it. And those two are going to butt heads like Hamilton and Rosberg. I'm sorry if I keep bringing it up, but it's one of the biggest recent examples of intra-team rivalries. Red Bull does not need a driver that is really close to Verstappen, because that's just going to cause problems. Helmut Marko wanting Lando Norris there? Max doesn't want Lando there. He wants Lando at McLaren to have really big, fantastic battles for the title at different teams, no team orders, all out absolute brawls. Max is looking forward to that, I can tell. Lando is looking forward to that. We're all looking forward to it. Norris versus Verstappen. That's going to be amazing, with maybe Piastri in the background. But needless to say, you can't have two strong drivers at Red Bull at the moment, not until Verstappen retires or moves on, and then you can change the Red Bull recipe. Another reason why I think Horner is really, really sad right now and is longing for a stronger driver lineup is that at the moment, the 1-2 for the driver standings is looking very, very precarious. Hamilton may have been second for the Qatar Grand Prix and taken out a huge chunk in the gap between him and Perez. And maybe it could get worse if Alonso keeps putting in decent performances and Checo either gets a DNF or maybe scores 9th or 10th or maybe even worse. Alonso will nibble away more and more and more towards Perez, and then before you know it, he's overtaken Perez for 3rd, with Checo in the fastest car 4th. Like Bottas in 2021. I reckon that 2024 for Perez is looking very, very cloudy. If it were up to me, I would have no issue in letting him see out the rest of the season as intended in his contract. That is the way it should be. And just let him get on with it and refocus and find out what he's been lacking on his own. What I don't want for him is for him to be forced out. I have an idea about who could replace Perez for 2025 if things don't work out for him as they're intended. Nico Hülkenberg. Has that got you curious? Well, you can go and watch this video next to find out more.